Pete Hegseth admits that the war games are a failure.
The Pentagon has a perfect record in all of its war games against China. We lose every time.
At the same time, China, a big reason for the Belt and Road Initiative is to not only strengthen its maritime shipping routes and its connectivity at sea, but also through land routes in order to bypass completely the U.S.'s attempt to choke it off. All that is to say is that now, yes, you have over 40 plus countries in the Belt and Road Initiative. You have the vast majority of the world trading with China, including its top partners, all across ASEAN and Asia Pacific, trading with China as their number one partner. And you even had South Korea, Japan, despite all of their participation in U.S. military exercises and provocations toward China in many degrees, economically, they refuse to decouple fully because of the disaster that it would be. So in a lot of ways, the United States is running out of cards or is completely out of cards. And that means, Brian, all these war games, all of these provocations, all of this military buildup, in my opinion, the only conflict that the U.S. and China will fight directly against each other is a nuclear conflict, because there is no reason or way. First of all, Pete Hegseth said the U.S. can't win that kind of war. China is not going to let itself be invaded. Why does it have a nuclear deterrent in the first place? So, Brian, your thoughts on this conclusion that I come to when I hear U.S.-China war?
I would be very careful. This is something that I had thought before 2014 in regards to Europe. If we remember what Europe was like before 2014, there was so much cooperation between Europe and Russia, but also Europe and China. It was growing, and it looked inevitable that Europe was going to work its way out from under the shadow of American political capture, hegemony, primacy, whatever you want to call it. But then what happened? The United States violently overthrew the Ukrainian government. They started what was a festering war in Ukraine, and they drew Russia into this proxy war. And Russia launched its special military operation in 2022, and that served as the catalyst to force them to decouple, because before that they weren't, or they only partially did. And so this is the exact same thing the U.S. is now putting into motion here in Asia. They know that Japan, South Korea, the U.S. is coercing them to do all of this. They themselves know this is not in their best interests. The business interests in these countries are not benefiting from this. They're still like opening factories in China to supply themselves with components for their manufacturing in country, in Japan, in South Korea, or factories in the region. But if the U.S. triggers a Ukraine-style conflict here in the region, that would serve as the same type of catalyst to force them to decouple from China, the same way Europe was forced to decouple from Russia. And the U.S., I don't know if there's any pipelines or maybe cables or something they can blow up or cut here in Asia to really cement it into place. But I'm sure that there are things that they're looking at in order to do that. And the threat of U.S. political interference, infiltration, and political capture still looms over all of these countries in the region. Thailand is building a high-speed rail link with China via Laos, which already has a high-speed rail line, again, courtesy of China. China is giving these countries infrastructure that the West for decades refused to give them. But there is, I still see the U.S.-backed political party walking up and down the streets every time there's local elections. They're still getting their mind, like right now. They're doing it, right? There's local elections, and they're out in the streets campaigning right now. That's still going on. There are still professors in Thai universities brainwashing Thai youths who have been part of U.S. programs, are receiving U.S. money. So this is a process that is still taking place. It is a looming danger. Just as the U.S. succeeded in wrecking Europe, they are still capable of doing that in Asia. That is the threat. That is what I think multipolarism needs to double down on, exposing and confronting this soft power the U.S. uses to politically capture nations. Because if it was just up to a nation's best interests, the U.S. would have lost a long, long time ago in Europe and here in Asia.
I agree. I believe that the United States is going to do a Ukraine model vis-a-vis China, although the timing of that is going to be incredible. It's going to take a lot longer, in large part because you're not talking about cutting off Russia. Russia's economy is very powerful. It's gotten a lot bigger, but a lot of that has come since the sanctions, actually. Before the sanctions, and even up until this day, we still are talking about a Russia that is mainly dependent upon exporting certain raw materials, and of course its military industrial complex has boomed, and now some Russian people, very pro-Russia people, which I would consider, I am for Russia's sovereignty. They would say, oh, well, what about the passenger jets? What about these? Yes, Russia's economy is developing very fast, but it is dependent upon exporting oil and other kinds of resources in that way. It is not a manufacturing powerhouse yet. China, however, is the globe's manufacturing powerhouse. And actually, Asia as a whole is the world's manufacturing powerhouse. So to cut off China and the rest of Asia from themselves is going to be a very difficult feat, because if you do that, unlike sanctions on Russia, which had a very bad effect on the world economy, but it's going to be a lot worse. We already just saw with the tariffs, just the threat of full decoupling between the US and China was going to send the United States into recession, which is why Donald Trump is doing the market manipulation. Not just because he wants to make money, which is people's theory, but it's because the United States cannot afford to go into a manufactured recession right now politically for the Trump administration. And of course, all the damage it could cause, unpredictable damage it could cause. So in many respects, yes, this is a strategy. It's going to be very complicated, which is why my fear is that it will spiral into, if not stop, the United States moving toward a position of, I mean, it has nuclear first use policy, moving into, well, we're at this existential stage. We can't go any farther. We can't fight them militarily. We can't fight them economically. Oh, look, we have this bomb and we just need a reason. We just need a way. And hell, the United States came very close with Russia in the Ukraine conflict toward building up toward that end. So any thoughts on this, Brian, before we get on to audience questions?
Yeah, I don't think people should underestimate just how far the U.S. is willing to go to achieve this. And we know now, because of admissions in the Western media, that the U.S. considered using nuclear weapons during the Korean War, the Vietnam War, even the war in Afghanistan.
The Taiwan.
Yeah. Oh, yes. The Taiwan Strait crisis also. So why wouldn't they think about using it again as they get more and more desperate? The other thing that is scary is that this whole economic war they're waging on China, they know is destroying the American economy, especially not for the billionaires. We all know that they'll always be okay. That's the only welfare that actually exists in the United States is for billionaires. But the ordinary people and the cost of living, like Danny, you're in the U.S. I don't need to tell you. I have family members that are still in the U.S. and that's all they tell me is how the cost is going up. You know, what is President Trump doing about any of this? Nothing. He doesn't care. And the tariffs, he knew, because this is what caused it in the first place. The tariffs during his first administration, the Biden administration cooperating with the Trump administration, continuing and expanding on those tariffs. That is why you have a cost of living crisis. And that is working its way into other areas of the economy. And that's just going to make it worse and worse. What the U.S. believes is that they cannot, they cannot compete with China. They will never surpass China. They cannot rebuild themselves and innovate and outcompete China. Even if they, all things equal, China still has 4 to 5 times the population of the U.S. This is just never going to happen. So what is their actual strategy? It's to destroy everything and hope that they can come out best positioned to rebuild, which sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie or something. But this is what's going on in their head as they get desperate. Because the one thing they won't accept is, again, a proportional role in the world, where just like in China, you could be a billionaire, you could be rich, you can have your yacht, and also the people who are buying your products can, eat healthy food and go to the hospital when they're sick and get maternity leave and things like that. Like, everybody could win. But in their mind, that's not how the world works. It's a zero-sum game of domination and subordination. And as long as that's the virus, that's the real mind virus infecting America, as long as that persists.
This is true.
Yeah, we all suffer.
Yeah, I mean, 100% true. It's the United States is as not, a lot of people criticize, oh, why are you calling the United States? Yes, the United States elite, the empire, the oligarchy, however you want to call it, They're not sleepwalking. They are very wide awake. They are moving in a very wide awake fashion toward this war. And with this trade war, we just saw that zero sum mentality explode. Of course, that always backfires on the United States, but they don't care. The elites, they don't care. They will continue to pursue this up until they exhaust everything. And then we have probably the biggest crisis that humanity has ever faced once that exhaustion occurs. But Brian, let us get to an audience question or two.
Sure.
How about we keep it on China. Brian, what do you know about China's thorium revolution?
I've been hearing about this. I've been hearing about thorium for many years. I think if anyone could actually make this a reality, it would be China. I think there's all kinds of, they're also working on fusion. Instead of fission, there's also fusion. They're working on that as well. And I think if anyone has a chance of succeeding, it will be China. China is pushing the boundaries of everything in ways that the U.S. could have been, but isn't, and could actually be working together with China to push. Imagine how win-win that would be for all of humanity, absolutely everybody.
Yeah, I can show an article from the South China Morning Post, Hong Kong-based. China is the world's first operational thorium nuclear reactor thanks to strategic stamina. Team working on project reportedly achieves milestone by completing fuel reloading while experimental molten salt reactor is running. Don't know what any of that means. Sounds all good, but I'll just read the first several paragraphs. Chinese scientists have achieved a milestone in clean energy technology by successfully adding fresh fuel to an operational thorium molten salt reactor, according to state media. It marks the first long-term stable operation of the technology, putting China at the forefront of a global race to harness thorium, considered a safer and more abundant alternative to uranium for nuclear power. The development was announced by the project's chief scientist, Xu Hongjie, during a closed-door meeting at the Chinese Academy of Sciences on April 8th, said the Guangming Daily on Friday. The experimental reactor, located in the Gobi Desert in China's west, uses molten salt as a fuel character and coolant, and thorium, a radioactive element abundant in the Earth's crust, as the fuel source. The reactor is reportedly designed to sustainably generate 2 megawatts of thermal power. And this is the big deal here. Some experts see the technology as the next energy revolution and claim that just one thorium-rich mine in Inner Mongolia could theoretically meet China's energy needs for tens of thousands of years while producing minimal radioactive waste. So a big deal. That's a big accomplishment, and one that is absolutely out of the eyes and in purview of the United States right now, given the direction of the economy and state.
Yeah, they don't talk about any advancements in China. If you ask the average American, they think Chinese people are still riding around on bicycles, like in the night, like in that footage from the 70s and 80s. They'll never talk about the largest high-speed rail network on planet Earth, built between 2006 and 7 up until now. That was all done in just that short period of time. All the innovation and construction, the engineering feat that represents, that they will ever talk about that. And they will never talk about this. This is something that I am going to look into deeper. And if I think there's enough information, maybe I'll write an article on it and also do a video.
So let's do one more question. Monzar Chahab. Brian, walk us through what he thinks will happen between the U.S. and Iran. Thanks to Chili Pepper, and then thanks to Monzar. Brian.
I highly recommend people just type in Brookings, Which Path to Persia, PDF in your favorite web search engine, and it is available for free to download. And the entire U.S. plan for Iran is there. And again, this isn't about, they admit in the paper, Iran doesn't want war with the U.S. or Israel. They want to be left alone. There's a Rand Corporation paper also that says it's purely for defense. If the best case scenario would be for Iran to just be left alone, but short of that, they just want the capability to build a bomb, not actually build the bomb, just have the capability and have that serve as a deterrent. And if they ever did have nuclear weapons, it would solely be for a deterrence. And they admit that in the policy paper that they are writing to draw up plans to lie about Iran, attack and overthrow the government. Because again, it is about domination and then creating appropriate pretexts they think people are dumb enough to buy to sell it to the public. Just like they did with Iraq. And President Donald Trump, everyone's holding their breath waiting for President Trump, the peace president. He names Michael Anton to lead technical talks with Iran. This is via Politico. And who is Michael Anton? He's a Bush Jr. Admin. He was in the Bush Jr. admin. He lied about WMDs in Iraq. He's a former BlackRock managing director, and now he's in the Trump administration. What do you think he's going to do there? You think he had a come to Jesus moment, and now he's ready for peace with Iran? Or he's there to play his role to lie about Iran and move this? And if you read the Brookings paper, it's about the U.S. appearing to be diplomatic while through back channels giving Israel everything it needs to carry out the attack on Iran. When Iran responds, the U.S. will then pretend to reluctantly wade into the war, which is what they were doing already. Do you remember Israel attacking an Iranian consulate in Syria and then attacking Iran itself, and how the U.S. was trying to carefully wade into that, doing it behind Israel, but wading into it incrementally? And this is their plan. So it's just a repeat. The whole Iran nuclear deal under Obama was in the 2009 Brookings paper, which Path to Persia. And in it, they said, we'll offer them this deal. We have no intention of upholding it. We'll sabotage it. We'll blame it on Iran. And then we'll have a pretext to go to war. We would prefer to do it that way than to just out of the blue attack them. That would get us much support worldwide. So that is the plan. That was the plan under Obama. It was the plan under the first Trump administration, under Biden, and now under the second Trump administration. They're literally picking neocon warmongers from the past, guilty of war crimes from past administrations. He's picking these people and putting them in charge of his, fake negotiations with Iran now. It's so obvious, but at the same time, because people don't want to believe that this is happening, it's almost invisible to so many people.
My assessment is very similar to yours, Brian, and I believe if what we've seen from U.S. foreign policy over the last several decades, that there is no doubt that there will be escalations toward war with Iran. This is the plan. I mean, the plan, if there is such a thing for U.S. foreign policy, but there is an objective, even if the plan can get sidetracked and there's hiccups and there's anarchy because of the market and the way that capital behaves. But in truth, the only plan that U.S. foreign policy has that fits the objectives of its oligarchy is to get rid of these emerging powers. And now they assume that Iran is the weakest link. Iran is quite a strong weak link, given how long it has lasted and survived and actually built up a pretty robust and challenging military capability that I think is one of the big sticking points as to, well, how does this happen? But I think we are going to see Israel at some point in the near future or medium future go on the assault against Iran, or attempt to, but it will have to have U.S. backing, and it will be very ugly. I mean, this is everything that's happening in West Asia, all of the axis of resistance versus the empire, all of that. I mean, all of it is to get to Iran. Hezbollah, even Palestine. Those are just impediments in the way. That's why they view them all as proxies, even if they're not really proxies, right? But Yemen, what the United States is doing in Yemen, it's all about getting to what really matters for the U.S. strategically as an empire, which is ensuring that there isn't an Iran that can be a model of stability for the rest of the region, because that model of stability has already had ramifications that are problematic to the United States empire, like, for example, what we are seeing, which I think is actually incredible in the sense that this highly sanctioned nation, pressured to collapse to such a high degree, has enormous ties with the emerging leaders of the multipolar world, or really the actual leaders. I keep saying emerging, but they're the actual leaders, China and Russia. And we see that not just on the economic front, but also on the political front, the diplomatic front. They are the ones who are kind of leading this multipolar world, and that's why Iran has to go. And so there's no doubt that that's going to happen. If we saw what happened with Syria, if we saw what happened with Iraq and so many other countries and resistance movements in the region, they're eventually gonna go for it. It's just when and how. That's why Iran continues to build up its defensive capacity. And I think that's why Iran continues to negotiate and continues to act in quote unquote good faith. It's not being belligerent. It's not saying it wants a bomb. It's not trying to actually build a bomb. It's what it's doing is it is building up the capacity to defend itself and trying to get as much time as possible to do that. Because, I mean, every day we hear Israel wants to strike. Israel, come on, let's strike. U.S., please, let us strike. And eventually the United States is going to say, okay. Now, whether it leads to all-out war, who knows? We saw just in the last 16 months, Israel do this a couple of times in Syria and then, of course, on Iran proper. So, but nonetheless, I think that's the direction. And it's going to happen. When it does happen, it's ugly. I think that's why the United States is trying to also build up to this to the extent possible that it can, using all the things that you said from the policy paper and all of the, I guess, all of the pillars and connections to that overall objective and posture needed for it. That's my assessment. And it's going to be, I mean, people better get ready because this is going to be maybe the task of people in the United States and the West probably sooner than any other question, because I think Russia and China are in a far more advantageous position than Iran. So I think Iran is probably going to be the first target of an all-out kind of war, because there might be an assumption that it can be attacked. It's not Iraq and it's not Afghanistan and it's not any of these countries, so it'll be bad. It will probably be an existential crisis for the U.S. as well, but it is, I think that's in the minds of the U.S. Foreign Policy Club. That's where they're kind of aiming toward. Build up toward Russia and China, but hey, if we can get Iran first, let's get it.
Absolutely. And in the policy papers, they talk about the necessity of eliminating Syria and Hezbollah before isolating and then focusing on Iran. And that is exactly what they did so from Bush Jr., Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump, that they have handed it off from one president to the other, uninterrupted continuity of agenda. And that's where we are right now. They wiped out the senior leadership of Hezbollah. They have fully collapsed the Syrian government. The U.S. is openly attacking Yemen. And I hear people saying, President Trump really wants peace with Iran, but Israel's undermining it. They're going to attack and undermine these peace talks. Israel is incapable of waging war without constant and full U.S. support. And in the policy paper, it said there's a whole chapter titled "Leave It to Bibi," approving or agreeing to or they differentiate between openly agreeing to and greenlighting Israel carrying out an attack on Iran or doing it semi-covertly, like, well, we don't really want that, but obviously behind closed doors, we totally enabled it and facilitated it. So again, it's just like what they're doing to Russia with Ukraine. They're pretending that Ukraine is having this war with Russia when it's the U.S. waging war against Russia through Ukraine. The U.S. is waging war with Iran through Israel. It waged war with Syria through Turkey, Israel, other Persian Gulf states. And then when all else failed, they literally invaded eastern Syria themselves. And so this is what they're doing. And I completely agree with you, Danny. People better get ready for it. And they even said it openly. Oh, look how weak Iran is. This is the best time for regime change. And then do you think President Trump, with all these warmongers in his administration that he himself picked, people are like, Trump wants peace, but he's got all these people in his administration holding him back. Who picked them? Who put them there? Who knew from day one that they were all warmongering neocons? Who is Marco Rubio? He's like one of the worst neocons that is still actually active in politics today. Who put him there? Trump did. So people got to kind of get with it and see through this, start speaking up against it, or else you're actually helping create this smokescreen. They're going to do all of this behind, and it's going to have devastating consequences for all of us, no matter where we are.
Yeah, and it's going to be profoundly because Syria was really, that war was so long, and it was a dirty war, and it was a proxy war, an all-out war with Iran. The only thing stopping an all-out war with Iran is the fact that Iran was far more capable than Syria, and is getting more and more capable of fighting back. But that, I don't believe that in and of itself will stop the United States, which means that we're talking about a war that I can't even imagine what it would look like, because we know what Iran has shown off, and what it's shown off like 10-15% of its capability, maybe less than that of its capabilities in these demonstrations over the last 16 months. But then you also have the fact that you just have so many factors in how the world would respond to such a thing. The energy, the what Iran can do in the region to make things difficult, and what the United States would have to do. In my estimation, even though Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, it might go as far as nuclear proliferation, nuclear confrontation, because the United States would be looking at a quagmire, the scale of Vietnam, but because that's how big Iran is, Vietnam was much smaller as a population when the U.S. actually waged war, but now it's 90 plus million people. I believe Iran is 90 plus million people, but Iran has a military far stronger than what the Vietnamese had back in, the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So we're talking about one of the most ugliest conflicts and wars in human history, and one that would be so damaging to the U.S. that, again, I go back to this. Well, how do these warmongers and war makers assess this? Well, they don't say what we got to stop. They say, how can we make it happen by other means, or how do we keep the fact that we have several thousand, 6,000, 7,000 nuclear warheads? Maybe we use one.
Israel has nuclear weapons.
Exactly. They have hundreds of nuclear weapons. Yes.
Yeah, they have nuclear weapons, and people have to think about this. It's so convenient for the U.S. because it would be like a nuclear strike on Iran without having to accept any responsibility for having carried it out, even though obviously the U.S. is complicit in everything Israel does. And this is why I warn people, and people are always, and I know they're well-meaning, but they're always complaining about all of the restraint Iran shows. Iran knows that they have nuclear weapons. They know how, if you fall into this trap, they're trying to, and the policy paper, the Which Path to Persia policy paper, openly talks about goading. They literally use the word goad. Goad Iran into a war because they know they don't want it, because they know Israel has nuclear weapons. They know the U.S. wants this. They want this excuse to create this excuse, and they refuse to fall into the trap. And they said, we might even carry out a full-scale airstrike campaign on Iran, and they might still not do anything because they know that it is a trap. People need to read the policy paper. Yeah, people got to stop, because if you're just listening to politicians and their lies that they're telling the public, and you're not reading the policy papers, I know they're boring, they're long, but that is the blueprint. You can't do something this big, can't build a global empire without blueprints. The policy papers are the blueprint. Just read the policy papers. You will know exactly what they're going to do, and then you won't be tricked anymore. You won't fall. You'll see straight through all of this. I don't have some special psychic power. I just read. They write what they're going to do years in advance, and then they do it.